In a world overflowing with distractions, we seek meaning. How do we transform ambition into something deeper, into true fulfillment? I'm Sam Pepin, CEO of Corcentrica, and I've spent years helping businesses succeed by connecting their goals to something bigger. On the Meaningful Podcast, we explore not just how to win in business, but how to grow as individuals. Through conversation with thought leaders, innovators, and everyday heroes, we uncover the stories that drive us towards something greater. Whether you're striving for success, seeking purpose, or just looking for the next steps in your journey, this podcast is your guide to navigating the intersection of ambition, growth, and meaning. So please join me and our incredible guests as we redefine what's possible in both business and life. Enjoy. Before we dive in, I just want to take a quick moment to say thank you. Episode 99. Wow, what a journey this has been. We are deeply grateful for each of you who's been following the Meaningful Podcast since the beginning, or perhaps even later on than that. Your messages, your review, your energy, it really means the world. As soon as the 100 podcasts drop, which is going to be on Friday, October 31st, right for Halloween. How fantastic is that? We're going to be a top 0.71% show in the world, meaning that we combine a monthly audience of 25,000 people, plus 50 plus 5-star reviews and 100 podcasts, 100 episodes on the show. This is an amazing milestone, and to celebrate it, we're doing something special. We're giving one lucky listeners early access to True the V. It's our brand new AI marketing ecosystems. It's going to be the AI arm of Corcentrica, which is the marketing agency powering this show. And perhaps if your CRM is where your contacts live, True the V is going to be where your marketing breathes. So it's going to be an amazing tool that is going to be able to aggregate all of your marketing inbound, outbound, and in intelligent fashions with the power of agentics. It's going to be open in a better format for the waitlist to begin in November. But you, one lucky listener, is going to get access to it before the rest of the world. To enter, simply leave a quick review of the Meaningful Podcast on any platform. That's it. One reviewer will get exclusive access before the rest of the world. How exciting is that? Now, let's get into today's conversation. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll call it fate. Welcome to the Meaningful Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Pepin. Today we're diving into the power of the liminal space, the science of subconscious alignment, and the art of transforming limiting belief into embodied freedom. Michelle Boyde is a registered master hypnotist and creator of the Alchemy Sequence, a powerful process helping visionary women shed old identities and embody their next evolution. After years as a brand and culture strategist, she now guides clients worldwide through subconscious transformation, bridging science, energy, and human potential to help them become who they're truly meant to be. If you enjoyed this discussion, please let the world know with a like, a small review, or even a quick share. It supports how more people find meaningful content just like this. Let's begin. Michelle Boyde, welcome on the Meaningful Podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you, Sam. Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here. I am great today. How are you?
I'm doing phenomenal. We're both on the East Coast, actually, today. You're in Florida, I'm in Montreal. Beautiful sunny day. It's a Friday. Nothing but love and grace, perhaps, is how I feel. But to kick us off, please tell us more about the Alchemy Sequence.
Yeah, so the Alchemy Sequence is a hypnotic sequence that I use with my clients. So I've been a registered master hypnotist now for over 6 years. And I have a blend of a series of different modalities that I bring together, from regression, energetic work, somatic work, and hypnosis. And I've formulated that into the Alchemy Sequence, which allows us to essentially help you go from where you are now, or who you used to be, all the way through to the new person that you want to become. So it collapses this space, which I call the liminal space, which is that weird in between space, when you're not who you were, you're not yet who you're becoming, and all the uncomfortable stuff that comes up while you're stepping in and embodying the person that you kind of know that you're meant to be. And that sequence is a fast track way to get you there subconsciously without actually using your head.
Phenomenal. As I do as always, let's go back to the very beginning of all of this. How did you get into hypnotherapy? Was it always sort of a gift of yours? Tell me more about the genesis.
Yeah, so I would say I'm one of those people who's had a few careers. So, I left uni and I became a professional shark photographer for a year, which I loved. And then I went into consulting, and I was in consulting for almost 15 years. And I used to be a brand and culture strategist. So I used to work with C-suite around, if this is the business strategy, what's the culture that we've got to drop it into to be able to deliver it successfully? And then how do we design interventions through the brand to shift and maneuver that culture for performance? So I did that for a really long time, and it was great, and it was cerebral. It was interesting. I got to work with, lots of people all over the world, lots of big companies that you'd know very, very well. And then I reached this point sort of 7-8 years ago where I was very, very much over it. I had that very kind of classic experience of sitting back, looking at my life and going, I've ticked all the boxes. I'm doing great. I've literally, my life is brilliant. And yet there's something missing. That kind of like, is this all this is? I didn't want to keep doing this particular work. So when I got my Australian permanent residency, because I'm not an Aussie by birth, I'm British by birth, but I am now a bona fide Aussie. As soon as I got that and I had the freedom, I thought, you know what? I'm out of this job. I have no idea what is next, but I know this isn't it anymore. So I had, saved up what I call the Freedom Fund so that I knew that I was good to walk out the door. I actually didn't have a plan. I was very kind of, burnt out and overworked. And I thought, I need a bit of space to just sit back and allow the next path to start to emerge without me forcing it. And, I took a few months off while my nervous system calmed a bit. I ended up training as a meditation teacher because I'd done that for years and it'd been really powerful. And then I ended up stumbling into hypnosis. And I did my first training as a hypnotist. And it was one of those real moments when you just go, this is it. This is what, I'm meant to do. This is what I'm designed to do. And this is what I want to do. So I didn't actually ever plan it. I just kind of stumbled into it.
Very interesting. You talk about the liminal space, which is such an incredible concept. And it's actually something I talk to myself and to others all the time. By the way, this sort of concept of this transitioning phase from, like you said, you are you are not anymore who you were, and you're aware of that, but you're not yet who you really want to be, and you're sort of in this floating in those uncertainties and doubts and fear. Tell me about how do you help specifically high achievers and people in general perhaps navigate those fears and freedoms that comes with innovating, basically being in the middle of this liminal space.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing with it is that when you look at high performers, when you look at visionary people who've had very successful careers, they have predominantly achieved that by being in their head upwards. We have a society, we have a market that rewards, abstract conceptual thinking, that rewards you being very smart and using your head to create progress. And so those people tend to have spent most of their life here upwards. They don't tend to spend that much down here for one. And then what happens is, because these people are highly motivated and they're used to being able to achieve their goals, they get into the liminal space and they go, okay, how am I going to sort this out? Because I don't like how I'm feeling. I don't like the level of progress I'm making. And so they seek out and they source more information and knowledge. So what you tend to find is these people are very, very well versed in their limiting beliefs and how they hold themselves back. They listen to lots of podcasts, they read a lot, they've taken lots of courses, they've retrained, they've done this. It's all up here in their head. And the thing with the liminal space is it's not one of these like gradual evolutions, because we're all evolving, on an ongoing basis. The liminal space is that it's one of those big leaps in your evolution. And what's actually happening, and this is how you collapse it, is you stop using your head, you have to go into your body. Because when we look at the subconscious, we look at the body, which is the bigger part of the whole system. So the conscious mind is only 4 or 5% of your awareness. And the subconscious is 94, 95, 96%, depending on what you read. It's the bit that's running the show. So where you are now, you have exactly the programming for the life you lead now and the person you are. So if you want to be a different person, you've got to change the programming. And actually, what you're being asked to is to fully embody and step into this next version of yourself, which means landing stuff in your body that you've had up in your head. And one of the ways I want to describe this for you is, and I'm very sensitive about words and language, because that's essentially what a hypnotist does, is we use words and language to create change, is, people will talk about what they believe or what they think. And you hear a lot of people talking about what they feel. Personal development world has got everybody walking around saying, I feel this and I feel that. And most of the time, if you listen, people aren't telling you what they feel. They're actually telling you what they think. They're just using the word feel. But there is a difference between what you think about yourself and what you believe about yourself. And so let's make this tangible. And I don't like this whole, this is a 6-figure business owner, this is a 7-figure, this is an 8-figure, but it makes it very clear, like it's a really tangible way for us to talk. So let's say somebody can sit in a room with some 6-figure business owners and they say, they feel, their experience is I'm successful. But then if we pull that person out and we pop them in a room with, say, 8-figure business owners, and they no longer have the experience of I am successful, then they think they're successful. They don't actually believe they're successful, because thoughts are situational, whereas beliefs are not changed by the situation. And so what you're being asked to do in the liminal space is all this stuff you think is to truly believe it and drop it down into your body. And so that's the way you actually collapse it, which is why going out and sourcing more stuff for you to think about is actually not helpful. It's coming back to this core stuff that sits inside you.
You talk about the fact that we are building a society that is very much on the logic side of things, logic and like you said, growing businesses and data and so on. And actually, a psychologist that I absolutely adore is a British actually psychologist by the name of Meg Chris, and he has this wonderful book, multiple books actually, and wonderful talk about brain hemispheres. And he said that we built a society that is so left brain now from a working perspective that, like you said, a lot of people are not in tune at all with their creative side. They're not in tune at all with this concept in which they can create their own life. And you have this great podcast also, right? Create your life by design, and create a life that you want by design. And really, from that perspective, it's very interesting to me because I see it very much all the time when I talk to common people. Is they will tell me things such as, well, I'm very good in the job that they have, and then they will tell me about how they feel completely disconnected though from their body, from the relationship. They feel there's something missing. They feel like they're incomplete. Perhaps that's typically the way they will describe it. Now, really, there's this side of me, I suppose, that is always asking myself, in this reunion of the mind and body, what are some practical ways to basically help those high achievers, typically very busy people, hopefully productive, but typically they would say they're busy people, to really reunite those two sides of their self? Because really, a healthy mind and a healthy body, that's not just a cliche, that's just the plain truth. So what are a couple of tips and strategies perhaps to really help them go further than just the theory and get to start practically reuniting those two selves?
Yeah, so the place I'd start is, let's actually talk about brainwave states. Because as you've said, you've got, left hemisphere, right hemisphere. And so, when you're in that left hemisphere and you're in this very outward focused state, like right now, you and I are focused outward on each other. We are in a beta brainwave state. And that's where people are spending an awful lot of their day. When you're in beta, you're really not very connected to your body. Whereas when you drop down, we've got 5 brainwave states. We've got gamma, which is the fastest. We've got beta. Then we come down into alpha, which is where most people drop into when they're in meditation. We've got theta, which is the hypnotic state, which I can talk about more. And then we've got delta, which is that more it's that really deep, slow state when your brainwaves are super, super slow. As soon as you choose to drop out of beta and you start going down through alpha and into theta, this is where you start to activate that part of the brain. It's where you start to get into your more creative state, and it's where you start to come into your body. It's very interesting with hypnosis is that a lot of people, when you say you're a hypnotist, people are like, oh, chicken dances and pendulums, and you're going to make these you. That's where they go first. That's always what they go first. And then a lot of people love to tell you, oh, you won't be able to hypnotize me. And then when I say to them, well, the interesting thing is there's a correlation. The smarter you are and the more creative you are, the easier you are to hypnotize. And one of the reasons for the creative element of that is because creative people are much better at dropping into the brainwave state that I'm going to take you into anyway. Like I was working with an amazing director who'd won at Sundance, and literally with her, I would say 4 or 5 words and she would just drop in because she's so creative. So she's used to accessing that state. So back to your question, if you can create more of your day where you're actively taking yourself into slower brainwave states, you're going to be less outward focused and you will naturally come more inward focused. But the other part is recognizing that your body holds a lot of wisdom, and notice when it's talking to you and becoming really curious rather than being dismissive. So if you've got some pain, some chronic health condition, there's something happening in your body, don't just put it down to, oh, I'm in my 40s now, or, oh, that's just what happens, or it's get really, really curious about what it is. Because, you know, if I whack my arm against the wall, that's why my arm hurts. But if I've got some random aches and pains or some problems with, say, my stomach or another part of my body where I don't really know why I've got it, your body is trying to talk to you. And there's so much you can learn from having that conversation with your body.
Interesting. Talking to your body, or at least listening to your body, could be very interesting. And really, I always come back to Joseph Campbell on this, which I think is such a phenomenal author and again psychologist. Once again, he says something around the lines of, we must be willing to let go of the life we plan so as to have the life that is waiting for us. And that's always a quote that I live by, because a concept in which I always refer to is this concept of when you're in the jar, it's very hard to see the label, right? It's very hard to have a bird's eye view on your own life and do these retrospections and be accountable for the life you live and so on. And that's in a nutshell, that's a little bit of what the Alchemy Sequence is trying to accomplish, right?
It is. It's gonna help you completely embody that new version who will see the world in a different way, who will have a different perspective. I mean, I can give you this example for the body stuff and about also, you know, shifting outside of the jar to make this really tangible as well. So, and this is a personal story.
Please. So
this was in April last year. Thursday, got to about lunchtime and I was crazy tired. Like, not a bit of like, oh, it's been a week and I'm tired. I'm talking so tired that I took myself off to bed in the afternoon. I couldn't keep my eyes open. I woke up on Friday and I couldn't walk.
Ooh.
Couldn't walk, really. And I couldn't walk because my knees no longer bent. And if your knees don't bend, it's very, very hard to walk. So when my friends took me off to emergency in Australia and went in, you know, this is casualty or A&E or, you know, depending on what country you're from. And they didn't really know what to do with me. They gave me some blood tests and they said, you know, go to your GP in a couple of days and get the blood tests, take some painkillers, etc. So for about 4 days, I couldn't walk. It took 3 weeks for me to be fully diagnosed. And what I'd contracted was something called Ross River virus, which the only people who know what that is Aussies. So it's a mosquito-borne disease, a bit like a dengue or a malaria, but it attacks your joints. And it's one of these ones that if you get bitten by a mosquito that carries it, you don't necessarily get it. Now, I actually said out loud to a friend 3 days before this happened that I was feeling crippled. I was like, I'm feeling crippled here in Australia. Like, I know it's time. I think it's time to move. I literally gave the instruction, and 3 days later, I was crippled and I couldn't walk. And so, the power of your words is very, very strong, much more than most people realize. But your body talks to you. It will take instruction and it will also tell you when it's not happy about a situation. And so, if you actually need to move outside of that jar or you need to walk away, there is so much information that your body's giving you that most people don't discount. They're so busy sourcing all this information that comes from other people, and they don't look at the information, which is the most relevant information for them, which is coming from their body specifically. And I can tell you, Rostrum is awful. I couldn't for 3 months pick anything up off the ground. I felt like
3 months.
3 months.
Wow.
And then you drop something. It's really, really difficult. And so I can tell you, I got this like fast forward of what it will be like in my 80s and 90s, you know, if we don't look after our mobility. Awful, awful disease. Avoid it at all costs.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. You mentioned the power of words, right? Seneca said that if you understood the power of your words, you would never have a negative, basically, thoughts about yourself again. And it's so very key because your whoever controls your language control your world, and the world that perhaps will be the way you see the world is actually much more important for you than how the world actually is, right? That's what Jim Rohn said. One of my favorite public speakers of all time. He said, "You don't see the world for what it is; you see the world for who you are, and therefore." Through your lens, basically, through your own glasses, in your world, perhaps, is the way you interpret things based on experiences, on obviously your past selves also, and how far you are within the self-growth journey. Now, what are the foundational stages, though, of that sequence, the alchemy sequence? Walk me through, from the beginning to the end, I suppose, what it looks like to start at whatever point one is to that transformational self.
Yeah. So the starting point is desire. It's always desire. And this is one of these aspects that I think sometimes people dismiss desire and the importance of desire. So as we sort of said already, if we were someone and we're looking at being someone else, it's because where we want to go, our desire has shifted. Any distortion that you're experiencing in your body is going to be directly related to that desire. So it's almost the equivalent of, if in business you are trying to, solve a problem, you need to get very specific on what the problem is to be able to solve it. There's no point coming up with a bunch of ideas and them not being directly related to a problem. And it's the same thing here. We have to know the desire to clear the distortions relative to the desire. So where we start is getting super clear on what your desire is and then getting it online in your body. Because what will happen is that when we put it in your body is going to have a response to it. And it's very simple. If you don't have the desire, it's because part of your body isn't on board. And this is especially true if you've got a great strategy, you've been taking all the actions, you've been doing all the stuff, and you're like, I don't know why I'm not quite getting there. It's because there's a part of your body that is holding you back. And so a lot of people get super caught up on, what are my limiting beliefs? And most people can tell you, if they're in the personal development world in any element, they can tell you all the limiting beliefs. But can they tell you the part of the body that isn't on board? And so we bring it online, and then we find the part of the body that's very specifically going, I don't really want to get on board with this desire. And then that part of the body will have so much knowledge around why you're not taking part. So let me give you an example. Again, I'll give you it from my life. I had a particular desire around relationship, around, partnership and romance in my life. So I bring it online with my body. I see where it comes up, and it's interesting because it's actually sitting outside my body. It's sitting over here on my left-hand side. So I'm like, okay, what happens if I bring that closer? Like, how do I respond if I actually get this desire a little bit closer to me? Bring it a bit closer. And interestingly, my left arm from here to here starts to burn. Now I'm like on fire, like I've dragged it through stinging nettles, like really on fire, just like that. It wasn't gradual, it switched on. And so I'm like, okay, so this is clearly part of the body that is not on board with this. And I go down into this part of the body and ask what's happening. And it basically turns around and it says, just F off. F off, because you're going to anyway, so you may as well just F off now. It was very aggressive, much more aggressive than I'm saying to you. And if you think about what this hand is doing and where the desire is literally it was batting this desire away. Well, this is why I wasn't getting the thing I wanted, because I'm actually batting it away with this part of my body. And so now we don't have to go into the limiting beliefs. We can just find the part of the body which is not allowing us to actually have the thing that we want. So we actually start with the body. I see you got a question.
No. Go for it. You start with the body.
Yeah. So we start with body. Desire, what part of the body is not on board with that part of it. And then we start to work with all the distortions that are happening. So that's anything subconsciously that is holding you back. We also go into deep programming because there's really 3 big pockets that I find that are required for you to step up into this next version. There's always one around your worth and your value and how you see yourself. There's always a second one, which is around your power and what you also believe is in fact possible. And the third one, which a lot of people don't often think about, because you get a lot of people talking about, oh, am I good enough? And, am I worthy of the success that I'm looking for? And is it possible? But the third one is responsibility, because this next version of you requires a whole other level of you taking responsibility. Like if you think about it, as your business grows and your business goes to another level and you're the CEO of that business, the level of responsibility that you truly have to embody is a big step up.
Oh, yes.
It's very much a responsibility thing. And most people don't truly take responsibility for this new version. And that's one of the things that holds them back. Sorry.
Wow. We'll come back to the concept of responsibilities because that's actually a very good point. You talk about the suppression of desire, and I see it as well. People think about desires as this evil thing, and this concept of who's really you. Are you the one actually wanting your desire, or it's sort of the ego, perhaps, portion of yourself that is actually desiring such things. Where do you think that comes from? From in our society, the Western society, because we know how Buddhism obviously is towards desire. The cheaper your desire, the richer you will be, very famously. But for us specifically, where do you think that comes from? This sort of shamefulness towards something so intuitive and so natural for us human beings.
So yeah, if we put the whole religious side to one side, the other bit is I actually think it's the way we run our economies. It's the way we do business. It's, if you talk to people about starting a business, it's very much around, is it commercial? Is there a gap in the market? It's a very logical process, and there's lots of people out there who are like, it's not about what you want to do. It's not about what you enjoy. It's about what you can sell. Of course, this has to be commercial or it's not a business. It's just a hobby. But actually, when you can couple it with something that you really desire, it's far more powerful. And the other thing, and this is what I also talk about and I teach, is you will often hear, this idea of collapsing time. How do you collapse time? And most successful people are often saying, I don't have enough time. There's never quite enough time to do things. So to explain this, imagine we've got a graph, and on our y-axis, we've got energy, and on our x-axis, we've got time. And we've got our 4 quadrants, usual kind of like chart that you'd see. So down in this corner, where we don't make time for stuff and we don't really have the energy for it, is all that stuff that's kind of unimportant and we never get to. Then we come along here and we've got the stuff that we always make time for, but we don't really have the energy for. And it's the obligations. It's all the musts, the shoulds, we have tos, right? Above that, we've got the stuff that we always make time for and we always make the energy for. And that's our priorities, yeah? And most people live predominantly in that space. And most business owners are in that space. It's like, what are my obligations? What are my priorities? And I always say that kind of leads you to a relatively ordinary life. Whereas if we go over here in this final quadrant, which is where we don't usually make the time, but we always have the energy for, this is where our desires sit. Okay. And so if you really focus more and more on the priorities in your life or your business, and then the desires, this pocket up here is where you start to really access your potential. Because also once you're doing stuff, and everybody knows this intuitively, when you do something that you really love, that's when you get into those flow states. When, time becomes almost irrelevant to what you can produce or the impact that you can have in that space. But people get so drawn down into obligations and priorities that desire so very often gets parked. And I think the most successful business people and the most successful people just in their life are those that always keep that desire part alive in what they're doing, because they're able to move out of just working in linear time day after day.
Talk to me about the concept of conflicting desires. A lot of people, and even myself sometimes, you'll have a desire basically, let's say on a Tuesday, that is sometimes fictitious, that is something also outside of who you are. Let's come back. You mentioned a relationship example. Let's do a relationship example.
Yeah.
We live in a world that is hypersexualized, and where intimacy actually has been suppressed a lot by it. And I speak about this quite often. There's a lot of these. I suppose here's the question: what is the difference, or how would you describe the difference between a desire and a temptation, which I think a lot of people fall for way too many times for various reasons? Do you look at both of these things as two different category, and if so, how?
So for me, a desire is something that really sits on your heart. It's something enduring. It's something that you come back to time and time again. A temptation is usually wanting to relieve something else that you're experiencing, i.e., I'm bored, so I want to fill that gap, or I'm stressed, so I want to fill that gap, or I'm not feeling very seen and appreciated, so I want to fill that gap. So I think that's the quickest way when you have, is it a temptation? It might be if I'm trying to get rid of an uncomfortable feeling or sensation. That's the way that I would distinguish the two.
Very interesting. Because really, I believe that desires are a great way to at least have some type of goal and life formatting basically aspect to it. But I think temptations are a thing that you should pretty much always be very careful of. Very, very rarely that I see successful people telling me that such thing was a temptations, they did it, and their life got better for it. It's typically the opposite. And I think that there's something very important to distinguish between the two of them, because a lot of times when people are talking about how undesirable their desire is, they're typically actually talking about temptation, about the fact that last Tuesday I thought XYZ, and actually I don't, that's not me at all. I was just sort of in that moment that sort of came to me. So that is something to, I think, be very careful of. But desire is truly, in its simplest sense, I suppose, it really boils down to what your intuitions, what the source, call it however you like it, is telling you perhaps that is possible for you, that is worthy of pursuing, perhaps. Right? There's this concept also that pretty much all things in life are hard when you sort of boiling it down to just the simple aspect of actually practicing it. So might as well do some type of hard that you enjoy, and that perhaps seek happiness through it. The one thing that I want to talk to you about, Michelle, is really the inner liberation portion of it. There's this big concept nowadays of shame, of guilt, of comparison, obviously thanks to social media and others. The really hypnosis, and I've been part of hypnosis sessions before. I love it. I'm a big fan of it. Is sort of a gateway to inner liberations. And obviously you hypnotize over 1,000 people now. So I think you're a trustworthy source of information here. And really sort of proving what I think so, which is not that hypnosis is magic, right? Like my good friend would say, Mr. Dexter Morton, that I know that you will listen to this. He always says that magic is only science that we did not explain yet, which I think is phenomenal. And so you obviously you really sort of it's sort of a mastery of the mind. It's not magic. It's sort of a mastery of this concept in which again, you can be fully connected if you allow yourself the time to do such things. So from your perspective, what are some of the most surprising transformation you witness through hypnosis, perhaps? And is there sort of somewhat of a pattern of things that are sort of that seem to be relevant for all people going through it, or is it more of sort of a case by case customized experience at the end of the day?
So, I mean, I've got lots of really quite distinct examples because I've worked on lots of different things. So, for example, I've gotten rid of tinnitus before, which Western medicine says there is no cure for tinnitus. You manage tinnitus. I have gotten rid of tinnitus before because your body created the tinnitus, your body can uncreate the tinnitus. And so it's an oversimplified way of explaining what I do, but fundamentally, most of these things have an emotional root cause. And do you know what it is for tinnitus?
No, not exactly, no.
So it's stubbornness. And so I go in and I work on the stubbornness that somebody has. And then I actually we go in around their brain and we go and turn off the signal for tinnitus. We treat it like it's you're tuning in and out of radio stations. Subconscious is hugely symbolic. So I don't need to be a doctor and actually understand the real physiological elements of what tinnitus is. It's a noise in the head. So how can I talk to the subconscious mind that might want to change the noise? So I've had tinnitus go. I've had insomniacs who haven't slept for 4 years start sleeping again. For people who are feeling very much in that liminal space, it's this sense of that people just start taking complete and full action and a complete upraising of standards. So it's that thing, when it's like, you're supposed to behave a certain way, you need to step up and do a certain thing, you need to say no to that. So, in the relationship sense, it might be stop choosing a certain sort of partner, stop going back to a certain partner, stop answering messages from a certain partner. In business, it might be actually going forward and asking for the right amount of money that you're actually worth. It might be following through on an idea, a bigger idea, embodying the idea that you really want to create. You see all of those kind of changes happening as well. You see people meeting partners. It all depends what the focus is, but you're just becoming the person who can have the thing you want. That's the crux of it.
Right, exactly. And that's huge. That's exactly right. I want to, Carl Jung has always been an inspiration of mine. Don't know how you feel about Carl Jung. I think he's exceptional. And there's a quote of his that I'd love for you to give me your opinion of, actually, because it's a very profound one. And it's one that I sort of wrestle with quite often because I think it's that great. But I'd love to sort of hear your take as somebody closer to that field than I am. But he says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll call it fate. How do you feel about all of that?
I mean, it is 100% true. There are people, we are basically walking around running on automations, like subconscious automations that we are not aware of. And, there's a reason why we do this. It's very efficient. Okay. So the way that the mind works is that as soon as you have mastered something sufficiently, so perhaps not even excellently, but sufficiently, we automate it so you don't have to think about it. So think about, for example, when you learn to drive, when you first get in the car and you're like, oh my God, there's so much stuff. I've got to not hit stuff. I've got to, especially if you're driving a manual, and then there's the handbrake and there's the indicators and there's looking like the endless stuff. It feels like it's real overwhelm, right? Probably now when you get in a car, you switch it on, you start driving and you're not thinking about a single thing. That's because you've automated that process. Subconscious went, we're doing this good enough, we're going to automate it. So now Sam can think about something completely different when he's driving. And so the reality is a lot of our automations are from a long, long time ago. So we are running on these automations. And what Carl Jung is talking about there is it's actually becoming aware of these automations, because as we progress in life, some of these automations are simply not relevant anymore. We need a better automation. And so you have to know what you're doing and what's not working quite so well for you to be able to change it. It's like if you've got something running in the business that's working well, you need to look into the process. You need to look into the actual bit that's running in the background for you to be able to change anything. Exactly the same principle. So he's 100% true. And so the conscious part is the first thing. And what you will find is there is a whole bunch of stuff that once you're consciously aware of it, you can immediately start to change it. You suddenly notice yourself doing it. And in the moment, you choose a different route. So you can solve a whole bunch of stuff by simply having conscious awareness. But there's also a whole bunch of stuff that even though you do it, you still end up doing old behaviors, right? Otherwise, the moment we had conscious awareness, we would just shift. So you can think of tons of examples where you do this. You know the type of partner you choose, but you still seem to always choose that partner again. And it's only later on down the line you go, oh, they're just the same as the one before in all these ways. Or you know what you need to do to move a certain aspect of your business forward. And you kid yourself that you're doing all the things, and you've got all these good reasons why you don't take all the actions at quite the time that you should. It's because even though you perhaps be aware of some of your programming and automations, your subconscious can be so sneaky to keep you in a safe place and repeating what you've been doing. So he's absolutely right. It's the first place and it can solve a whole bunch of stuff, but there's also a bunch of stuff that you then have to go deeper on.
Why is it for some people so simple? Nothing is easy, but so simple to get through hard things and perhaps evolve their own person without an hypnotherapist or without a coach. It just sort of, it seemed like it comes natural to them, which obviously we can talk about that, but it's way more about the practicing of it than the just being naturally born as somebody that can change itself or change oneself or even change a world, perhaps, quote unquote. And for some people, it seems like the end of the world. They go through this hard work, this hardship, which I don't want to minimize it, but it seems like it's taking over the whole life and really sort of lose your self-identity, lose perhaps the love of oneself and also the world itself. Why is that? Why is it that some people are exceptional of going through hardships and becoming better on the other side, and for some people it seems like this declic perhaps simply is not happening?
So everybody has very different, there's similarities between people's programming, but everybody's upbringing will have developed them into a different version. So some people are very well programmed for tough times. Other people aren't programmed with that level of resilience. Some people are just very well programmed for developing wealth, and others are less well programmed for that. Some people are excellently well programmed for picking romantic partners and developing deep and meaningful relationships. Some people aren't. You can look at all these different aspects. And so it's, if you've got kind of enough of that programming and you've learned enough strategies and you've got enough push through, which a lot of people have, you can push through to a certain extent. But if you've not got that set up, if you haven't also learned to process emotionally what's going on, it eventually catches up with you. Because every emotion, we have all these big groups of emotions. And like you've spoken about, for example, you mentioned shame earlier. So shame is one of those big buckets. Shame is like the heaviest emotion. If you're carrying a lot of shame, it literally feels like in your body, like you're covered in like sludge. It's heavy. It literally feels like it's holding you down. And so you're not good at processing those. And again, different levels of aptitude in different people, depending on how they grew up and the relationship with their parents and whether they were feeling emotions or whether we just pushed them all straight down. All of that is further going to impact that as well. So there's an element you can push through. There's an element you can use strategies, but at the end of the day, your programming dictates so much of this.
Absolutely. You talk about programming. It's, to me, and I meet a lot of exceptional people, which I'm very happy about, obviously. One thing that seemed to be pretty much always the case, though, is a struggle to let go of control. For men and women, actually. You work with a lot of women, so I'm sure that you're going to be able to give me
but yeah.
That's right. So I'm sure that you'll be able to give me an enlightened, basically, answer to this. A lot of high achievers have this perhaps obsession with control, which is it can be a good thing, but can certainly be something that is I suppose restricting in of their full potential. Perhaps let's just put it this way. I recall a very interesting dialogue with Leila Delia, which basically she talks about this concept that control is an illusion, right? And letting go is really where the real power begins. This sort of concept that's giving it enough space to surrendering and afterwards being able to build back up even stronger, perhaps. Why is it so difficult, do you think, for high achievers to embrace uncertainties? And how do you help them, and how hypnotherapists perhaps can help them with this sort of bridging that gap between this concept of actually not having control is not always a bad thing, perhaps?
I mean, I would say with a lot of high performers and a lot of people who go on and build businesses, they actually have a more capacity for uncertainty than perhaps they appreciate. They have to, because you're actually operating usually in an environment with quite a lot of ambiguity.
Sure.
And uncertainty. But the control is fundamentally about safety. It's always about safety. the subconscious mind has a number of prime directives. The first one is actually to completely preserve your identity. The second one is to preserve the physical body. And so when you're trying to implement control or maintain control, it's simply because you're trying to keep yourself safe. Maintain your identity, maintain your physical body, i.e. stay safe. And so the work here is actually around your nervous system. It's your capacity in your nervous system to hold something different or hold something bigger. And that's where the work is. Because if you think about what happens is that we see a perceived threat, and that threat can often be something different to what I already experienced and I'm familiar with. So we've got something different, we've got a threat. The nervous system then shifts immediately into the sympathetic division. We've got two divisions, parasympathetic, which is when you're relaxed, it's when you heal, it's where you're supposed to spend most of your life. And then we have sympathetic, which is that fight, flight, freeze. And so we shift into that part of our nervous system, which makes us go exceptionally foveal on that particular threat. And so we also become very poor at finding solutions when we go into this state. But the reason we're in this state is because we want to survive the threat. So this is when your body pumps full of adrenaline. It's when, you feel your heartbeat raise, your breathing increase, all to escape whatever this perceived threat is. And so if you want to get more comfortable with ambiguity, it's about not seeing a change as a threat and being able to coax your nervous system more easily back into that parasympathetic dominance, where you then go into that more expanded state where you suddenly realize, I can solve this problem so much more easily. I've got so many more ideas. And so, I actually think high performers are better with ambiguity than they realize.
Sure. So they just need to accept it. You just need to embrace it, perhaps.
And just work on your nervous system. And if you think about, if you are constantly stressed, which is where a lot of them are, for whatever reason, if you're constantly stressed, it's not even just the fact that stress feels crap. It's the fact that, you sleep less well, that you can see yourself, physically deteriorating, and the world feels heavy when you're really stressed. But you literally won't perform as well, and you won't be able to manage change as well.
There's this new idea that sort of, there's sometimes you read a book or you hear a talk, and there's sort of the way it was said. It's not completely new, like you never sort of came across it, but now it's sort of just click, and it's sort of now become so obvious to you. So anyways, I was reading Let My People Go Surfing by Yvon Chouinard, which is the founder of Patagonia, a very interesting gentleman. And he was talking in a book about the fact that perfection, and that's even how we give definition to words, perfection is not when you cannot add anything more, is when you cannot remove anything from it to basically for fullness to basically be just as is. So for example, if you're describing a chair, the definition of a chair, you want it to be as general as possible so that all chairs can be part of these definitions. But if there's something in that definition that you can take away, then your old definition was actually not as perfect as this new refined one. And I see a lot of the work that basically we're doing with self-improvements to be the exact same. In many ways, it's much more about remembering who you are already, sort of shedding perhaps what is not, instead of continuously perhaps trying to build on what needs to be. You're following me?
100%. And I completely agree. So you are, when you pop out of your mum into the world, you are, if we're going to use the word perfection, you are perfection.
Sure.
Baby believes that they are worthy of every single thing that they need and desire. They carry no stuff. They've got no baggage around what is possible. They see the world through complete joy and curiosity. That's perfection at the very beginning. And then what happens as we move through life is we just keep picking up lots of stuff that's not ours. So you're 100% correct. It's about getting back to who you are. And so this next version of yourself is the most stripped back version, without all the stuff that you've picked up, all the baggage doesn't belong to you, and that holds you back.
Yeah. So what are what's typically the most common perhaps things to shed as high achievers to reclaim that truth? Have you seen sort of a pattern with working with so many of them perhaps?
Yeah. So a big bucket is all to do with worthiness. It's, do I deserve the success? What am I actually worth? Asking for your value. when you're stepping up into a new level of something, then invariably there is a new relationship to money that is required. And this is what's quite interesting is you will see, I see this a lot. I'll see people coming out of really good careers. I've worked with people who were at Google, Atlassian, places like that. And they've gone, I'm done. I'm time to do something else. They never felt like they had any money stuff when they were in those jobs and when they were earning those big salaries. And yet when they come off of that and they want to start a business or they want to move to this next level, you'll see all the money stuff come up. It's like the money things that you didn't know you had because you had the nice money ticking in and you were, that's where it happens. Or you see a business owner who's suddenly wanting to really grow what they do and impact more people. And it will be all the money stuff comes up. So what am I actually worth? Do I actually deserve this? Is a really big bucket. And it's happening for everybody at some level. And there will be for everyone, there will be a level that will start to crop up and you'll start to feel that stuff come through. It's different. Right. It's different for everyone. Another bucket is actually what is possible, because we are so indoctrinated into, thinking linearly about these are my skills, these are my experience, or this is what the market needs. This is what we can offer, etc. This is how I can work. This is how I can operate. And it keeps us in a very sort of small space, or a very repetitive space, should we say. And so the people who really step up are the people who almost zoom out completely and they see opportunities, they see a way of thinking that other people just don't feel. And so I talk about your beliefs being the parameters of your potential. So to give you this as an analogy, imagine you've got a house and out the back you've got a garden. You've got a fence around that garden. And that fence is almost like that's your beliefs. And it's the parameters of your property, right? And what happens is that you operate inside that fence. So you are playing in exactly the same area and you will stumble across the same resources in your garden, the same areas of interest. Everything is just in that space. As soon as you start to shift your beliefs and you expand them, you move those parameters of potential outwards. And you don't even have to move them that much. And you start to find different resources, different ideas. It's a different space to play in. And that for me is fundamentally what growth mindset is about. It's people who just keep edging their beliefs outwards about what is possible and how they see the world. So there's that space as well, because a lot of people can't see the thing that they're moving towards or the potential of the thing they're moving towards. And the final bit is the responsibility bit once more. And I would say, again, so the bit you were talking about how some people move through things faster.
Yes.
People take true responsibility. They are the ones that know that it's all on them. And what that actually looks like in practice is knowing the new standard and maintaining the new standard. And noticing, I didn't maintain the standard, I'm going to keep maintaining the standard.
And that's the hard part. It's the maintaining part that is hard, because how often do we see people, let's take New Year's resolution, for example, You have a bunch of them. It goes well for the first 6 weeks and then complete crash down. Exact same person as you were before this, January 1st in this case. So that is the maintaining portion is so incredible. And I talk with athletes and people that world records and so on. And they always tell me the same thing. Sam, it's very hard to get there. It's much harder to stay there. Trust me on that. So that's always something to definitely cultivate. You talk a lot about this concept of the noise versus the knowing, and the fact that it sort of clouds a lot of the clarity in the people that you see in your clients, and I see this all the time also. There's sort of as you're navigating the life ahead, obviously there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of people that will tell you advice, a lot of people that will say, well, you should do this, you should try that, you should, and this process, it doesn't just quiet the noise, it really sort of clears the way for a new vision, which is exceptionally important. And the noise is something that we talk a lot about with social media, with just how many information that we're being bombarded with. But from your perspective, what is the noise that you often see that sort of clouds your client's clarity, and how do you help them get back to to the knowing, to the what is and not what may be, and this person might think this, and I don't want to do that because they will judge me, right? This sort of projection of an insecure self into a world understanding. How do you navigate all of that?
Well, the noise is in the head, the knowing is in the body.
Okay.
And so it's back to that, because you don't have noise in your body, you have noise in your head. As you say, you pick up all of these different places. One of the big ones is people's definitions of success. So we have these sort of big definitions of success that we pick up from society. We just sort of, there's this point of our life where we're kind of given a roadmap, and this isn't everyone's roadmap, but a big proportion of people's roadmap is do well at school, go off to university, college, get a degree, go get a good job, and then buy a house, get married, have kids. You will be happy. And we carry these things, but they're so deeply rooted in us. And of course, what often happens, and the reason why a lot of this stuff crops off usually around about 35, I find. So most of my clients are kind of, they're coming into their early 30s, mid 30s, then all the way through their 40s and onwards, is you've done stuff, you followed all the roadmap, and then you sit back and you go, I don't feel how I thought I was going to feel. So a big part is really looking at the definitions of success and understanding which of those are really part of your going to contribute to real happiness, joy, experience on your future path, and which ones of those might almost be just like hygiene factors. They might be things to do, but they're not part of the bigger picture. So, for example, I use this one, UK, Australia, and also in the US. I can't speak for Canada because I don't know enough about it, but purchasing a home is a real definition of success.
Oh yeah, in Canada as well. I can confirm that.
Need to, to buy a home. And certainly in Australia at the moment, I mean, I know house prices have gone up all over the world, but in Australia, we really have a lack of stock, exceptionally high prices. Like when I look at what you can buy in the States versus what you can buy there, it's wild. And so you've got this whole generation of people who were brought up, told you should be able to buy a house. You're not actually successful unless you buy a house. And now they can't buy a house. And the thing with our definitions of success, it's basically a scorecard that sits in our subconscious that we are marking ourselves.
Yes.
That's the problem with it. So what we need to understand is which ones of these are truly, truly ours. Like, for example, I bought a flat in London when I was 28. I was very independent. I was I'm going to buy my flat on my own, blah, 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 blah. Bought my flat, sat back, and then realized again, this isn't my definition of success. Was it a great financial move? Absolutely. Would I do it again? Yes. But it's not actually fundamental to who I am and the path that I'm on. So your definitions of success are a really big part of that. And it's about cutting out the noise. I've got a podcast episode on this, and I'm like, one of my biggest bits of advice, if you are in that place where you're like, I don't know what's next, I don't know where I'm going, I'm not sure of my path, just stop listening to podcasts, stop reading, stop looking at Instagram, stop watching TV, do it for a week or two, cut out as much external stimulation, and your inner knowing will start to emerge. But for most people, it's so quiet that amongst all the stuff they constantly consume, they can't hear it. And this constant consumption is like outsourcing of power, because every time you have to ask somebody else, every time you need an external source to tell you what to do. And don't get me started on people who are asking AI and ChatGPT about what am I supposed to do with my life, right? But every time you do that, you are essentially saying, I don't trust myself enough. And so knowing inside of you is going to get quieter. So, the most powerful thing, and I'm sure, as a successful business owner, this, you've had moments when you just intuitively know this is the right choice. And you can probably post-logically rationalize it if someone said, why are we doing this? But sometimes you just know.
100%, absolutely. And the this concept of you were never broken, you're just buried, is one I always come back to, because you're right. I had this great podcast episode actually talking about this concept of the learning more is the favorite procrastination systems of a smart person. Is no, I need to get informed on this, I need to get informed on this, and just delaying actions that you actually know will better your life just for the sole sake of this insecurity, this concept of you trust everybody's opinion more than your own, which is maybe the only one that actually matters. That doesn't make any sense. But it is so true. And I think we've been conditioned to that without a doubt. There's this concept of wholeness also that I think is such an important point. Creating from a place of wholeness is so important. I think I'm a man of God, perhaps, so that's obviously that's how I call the source. But let's call it the source to be neutral. The source made all of us creators, made all of us have the ability to create. Let's just put it this way. And therefore, creating from a place of wholeness is so important. And that really starts with the subconscious. What you do not perceive controls your life way more than what you can, actually, which we discuss all over this episode. But I'm really interested from your perspective, how does subconscious transformations leads to creativity and creativity perhaps in one's vision, in one's business? Because we talked about the clarity portion. That's very simple. That's actually not even debatable in my opinion. But the creativity portions of it, how does a calmer mind actually have better output, is always something that I'm quite fascinated by.
Well, I will just say, before I completely dive into that, I agree with you on this wholeness piece.
Yeah.
And, if you actually talk about integrity, and it's really interesting because I won't go off on this sidebar, but I do a lot of work with human design and gene keys, which tells you what you're here to essentially do. And my vocation is around integrity. And if you look at integrity, so it's really interesting that I actually do what I do. Integrity is about strength. It's not about, am I a good person? If you think about integrity in terms of engineering, if a bridge has integrity, it's strong. Something that has integrity has wholeness. And so to your point, you're creating from the wholeness of every part of who you are. And I would also just say back to what you said, with God or source, is again, would that not place a desire on your heart that you're meant to bring into the world, which is why desire is so important. But yeah, so
sure.
You're from a place of wholeness. So once again, you only have so much capacity up here in this 4% of your conscious awareness. Once you get into the body, once you drop down into those brainwave states, you have access to, in alpha, into theta, into parts of your right-hand side of your brain, which has so much more creativity. That's the creative part. But also, that is where you do actually connect into something bigger. So if there is going to be messages and if there is going to be inspiration, that is all going to come down in that way. The other part that I work with is human design. I'm not sure if you're familiar with human design.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So I guess for anyone who's listening and isn't, it's an energetic blueprint of your potential. And within human design, it's all about not operating from the head and operating from your body. And you have your strategy and your authority. And your strategy is essentially how stuff comes into you. And then your authority is how you choose what's correct and not correct from you. And that strategy part, that can be, depending on your belief system, that's God, that's universe, but it's definitely something bigger than yourself. And so, again, you're operating from your body when you follow your strategy and you follow your authority. So it's almost like if you just want to increase your capacity, use your body.
I want to end with something that you talk a lot about, which is the next thing. This sort of innate function that we have of it, depending on how fulfilled you are and how whole you are, perhaps coming back to it, of the next thing, the next big things. I'm currently here, and therefore, but to be really happy, I need X, Y, Z. Might be on that checklist that you were talking about, right? I'm not conventionally successful, and therefore I should feel ashamed or perhaps guilty towards that. There's really a reframing of all that is so important to understand that actually, no, your definition of your happy self is probably a great guide to begin with. Sure, get influenced by people you respect, by role models, by the source, all these great things, for sure. We're all influenced, so might as well be influenced by quality things if you could. But that being said, this coming back to high achievers, perhaps always chasing those external accomplishments to sort of validate, or at least try to validate their inner emotions, I think is something that is so very key. And you speak to a lot of them, and in all these people, like you mentioned, that says, well, I've done all the things, right? The checklist is all done. I have a house. I have 2 children. I'm married for 20 years. I was taught this was happening. I was taught at the end of that rainbow is a pot of gold, as my mother would say. But still, you're still left unfulfilled, perhaps. And really, and you told me before this, before recording, that you were just listening to the episode with the shaman that we had, transformational shaman, which was phenomenal. I always come back to this idea by Byron Katie, which is there is nothing outside of you. You are the one you've been waiting for, which I think is simply beautiful. How do you, I suppose, how visionaries, high basically achievers reframe this sort of never-ending chase for external accomplishments into inner fulfillment, into this understanding that, no, actually, my friend, you are the source. You are what you've been looking for and waiting for. Tell me more about that.
So I think what's also important to note is that high-performing, successful people do want to keep achieving. So it's not that they don't want to stop. They want to keep doing that, and that's cool, but they just want to have a slightly different experience of that. And so if you think about what's potentially uncomfortable about the experience, is every time you have another goal and another achievement, until you get there, there's an experience of lack, which is emotion charged. And then what happens is we achieve the goal, we get all the hormone releases, the dopamine, etc. We feel really good, we did the thing, and then almost immediately that subsides, and then you go back through the cycle. So it's not the cycle of actually achieving and striving, it's the emotional experience and the almost being what's the expression I want, but you're attached to that hormone hit that also comes out of the achieving, the dopamine hit. So it's about being able to actually balance that out so you can have a similar experience throughout achieving goals. And not to say that you don't feel great when you achieve it, but you're actually more emotionally regulated throughout that experience. So that is going in and looking at the programs as well that are, because most people that do that as well, they have to achieve a certain amount to feel enough. You know, that's the core program that's fundamentally running. So we need to, rework that experience. But again, if they can have more, so I think sometimes it's a bit tricky as well when you hear someone like me saying, "I'll be in your body more." It's a bit like, okay, yeah, but how? How do I do that? So if you're able to imagine this, right? When you are in your head, when you are wanting, when you are striving, right? Your energy is very forward. Like it's very forward because you're going forward. And what happens is the energy actually moves out of your body. So you actually feel quite disembodied. And that's what you're experiencing when people are very, very up in their heads and they're just so lost in their thoughts. There's so much noise, there's so much chatter and they can't relax. They're actually disembodied. So if you give someone the experience of pulling the energy back in and moving the energy down, so you actually feel almost like your energetic center of gravity is sitting down here in your hips as opposed to sitting up here, you suddenly feel embodied. And I'm obviously really over exaggerating my body movements from this back to this, but you actually see that happen in hypnosis when you move people in that way. You watch them, and most people obviously they're sat back, but you watch them sink in and sink down. And so it's about inhabiting your body as well as doing the programming work, to trust for it to be less attached to the outcomes, for you to know that your worth isn't attached to whether you achieve it or not, that you are worthy irrespective of what you do on any day or what you achieve. There's all that piece, but there's also that piece about where you move the energy. If that makes sense. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And that's actually the last time I was going through hypnosis sessions. It was actually recorded so I can see basically myself afterwards and the body movement and so on. And I was exactly right. Down and sort of down and leaning backwards was pretty much immediate actually once we were into it. So I think that this concept of energy, forward energy, backward energy, neutral energy, and so on is very interesting and very, very important to understand. Michelle, I'll end like I always do. What do you think the future of hypnotherapy looks like? You mentioned very slightly AI, mentioned other things also. Where do you think this field how do you think this field will evolve, and what can we be expecting 5 years on the road?
My hope is that it's going to become more mainstream. There's lots of wonderful modalities. Hypnosis is fantastic. It's very powerful. And there's so many people that discount it because they put it in the woo-woo side of things, even though there's lots of science to back up. There's studies out of Harvard University, etc., that it's actually, it's really, really powerful. So my hope is that it's going to become a bit more mainstream, and that people are going to start using it as a healing modality day to day in their life. So I just say this, if we go back, a number of decades, people didn't clean their teeth every day. That wasn't a thing. If you met someone now and they said, "Oh, I just didn't clean my teeth this morning," you'd be like, "Ooh, you didn't clean your teeth." It's now become such a normal thing that you clean your teeth in the morning and you clean your teeth before you go to bed. I want to see us in a place where meditation and hypnosis just becomes a thing that you do. It doesn't have to be a big event, but maybe you're doing 10 minutes, 15 minutes here and there during the day, and we're cleaning up what's happening in our bodies in the same way that you constantly clean your home. You just clean up, you wipe some surfaces down, you put some stuff away. That's what I hope to see for the future of hypnosis.
Beautiful. Michelle Boyde, it was an absolute pleasure to share this scene with you on this episode of Meaningful Podcast. Thank you you have a very calm energy, very soothing energy, at least I think so. I'm sure our audience will think the same. And to end this episode, I would love if you could share some last words of wisdom with our audience, please.
I'm going to say desire. I'm going to say, don't discount the power of your desire. Do not let it be put aside because it doesn't feel logical.
Thank you for spending your time with us today on the Meaningful Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who could benefit from it. And always remember, your story matters. Make it meaningful. We hope to see you next time.